They like cats and small dogs or chickens.
I think that's the way I did it. I just came out and awesome.
Oh, you'll see flocks of raccoons in the city more than you see out here. There's so much birds.
That's good point. No, that'll keep them nice. I worked 4 years on that bicycle route. 4 years. I was 4 years straight without ever eating.
Yeah, you might as well come over here and sit with us.
I gotta stay within reach to do this thing. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Very informal tonight. What we're going to talk about tonight is this is the last of our 5 or 6, actually it's been about 7 or 8 with the ones we did starting last December, public forums, and we've broken them up to be different categories because each of these categories are different parts of this 5-year plan that we're creating for the district. So tonight we conclude the officially scheduled public forums with one on facilities, safety, security, and transportation. So as we've done with all of the others, I have a brief, and tonight is briefer than others, presentation to give within each of those areas just to kind of fill you in on some highlights of things within those areas that you may or may not know about. And then from there, what we've done and what we'll do again tonight is just turn it over for questions you have, thoughts, comments, suggestions. What we're doing, just to give you an overview with all of this, is we're pulling all of this information together from these forums, from our faculty, staff, and students also, in creating a plan that we plan to present for board acceptance on June 9th at our board meeting. The draft of that plan, based off of all of this feedback, will be completed by this Friday, and I plan to email that out for all of our faculty and staff here, board, and those of you that have been attending these meetings or have signed up for our email distribution list. If you haven't done that, there's a sign-up sheet by the door. If you're already on there, then you'll see this draft Friday, and what I'm going to encourage is that feedback be given as far as thoughts of what's in the plan, ideas, comments, suggestions on how to make it better, questions on what's there. So that's kind of what we're working towards, and that'll give us about a 3.5-week window to be able to revise the plan based upon feedback that comes from the draft. So that's where we're headed, and so tonight's discussion is going to be very important for the overall plan that we put together. As we've been doing since February, we are video streaming this live right now. The recording of it can also be found off of our website, linked to Ustream, that we use for that. So at some point, once this finishes, I'll probably turn this around so that they feel like they're part of the discussion. We do actually have some people that watch these things live. So just to get into these different areas then, we'll start with facilities. And as most of you know, that the new project that was done here was completed, and I believe students started to attend here in 2004. There was a bond issue that was passed in 2000. As part of that bond issue, one of the things that was required was that there was a 0.5 maintenance levy attached to the actual bond issue. Both of those run through fiscal year 25. So those will be in existence here for another 13 years with what's left to pay off on those levies. But so when that was done, the high school, from what I understand, was completely gutted and renovated. The middle school and elementary school were built off in the back here, along with the ball fields and stuff that were put up in the back part of the campus. So we have a very new, relatively speaking, facility here that our students attend and are part of. And for the most part, they're good facilities. As with any place, we do have our issues here and there. One of our issues that we continue to battle are problems with our roof, and we continue to work through them, as evidenced right behind you over there, actually. But we have a couple different types of roofs that are on here, problems that we deal with. This bond issue, that .5 maintenance levy, is used to help with the upkeep of the facilities, problems that may arise. Overall, on the facility side of things within the district, we spend a little bit over $1 million a year keeping these facilities up and running. When you add in all the different expenses that are there with what we have to do to operate these buildings and to keep them up to date. The other thing I wanted to mention about facilities, and some of you may be aware of this and some not, Athletic Boosters approached us last summer about working with us, but they would be the ones that were spearheading this, to go out and try to find large corporate sponsorships outside of our area to try to put in a new track and or stadium. They've had drawings that were done on that in the past here in this district, and there just was not the money to be able to do something like that. So we have this project that the Athletic Boosters are working on, and they are actively working on that. We'll see exactly where that goes. But as far as facilities go, it's kind of a general overview of our operations. Safety and security. Things, again, that you may or may not be aware of. We have cameras throughout the campus. There are a total of about 80, roughly, between inside of the buildings and outside of the buildings that are mounted around, that we're able to go back and view if there's ever a need to. Lighting has always been an issue. Those of you that have been to these forums, lighting seems to come up every time. We have lighting on the property that up until House Bill 264 project a few years ago, the energy efficiency program, used to all be on one switch basically. It was either they were all on or they were all off. When they did that project, they were routed to two different ones. So right now, as it gets dark and in the morning until it gets light, all of the lights are on, I think from 6 in the morning until it's light, and until midnight. Between midnight and 6, half of our exterior lights are actually off. And I know that that's not something that's well known throughout the community, because we do regularly hear that it looks like a airport landing strip over here with all of the lights. But we have made progress in that realm, and we will continue to look at the options that we have with the framework that lighting is set up with, to see if there's other ways that we can work with that also. But part of the reason that those lights are on are safety and security reasons. We don't want people in dark parking lots trying to get back and forth to the building, to events, different things of that nature. We have to be somewhat proactive with being able to avoid problems also. Doors. One of the first things that I heard here as soon as I started last year, it was a matter of minutes before I heard it from numerous people, was the perception that 3/4 of the community had a key to get into the building and could do that at any time they wanted. I don't know that that was true, but that's what many people believe to be the case. So we changed all the exterior locks in July or August, and there's only a handful of people now that actually have a master key to get in. We went to an access card system, swipe cards that look like this, and with those cards we had a system that was already in place. We didn't have to invest any money in this. When these buildings were redone, this swipe card system was installed on not every entrance around here, but the big entrances have this swipe card system. The beautiful thing about that is we can go ahead and give somebody a card. If it gets lost, we can deactivate it. If it's out of sports season, if somebody, for example, is a football coach and needs access during the months of August through November, we can set it so that they have the ability to get in August through November, and then it's deactivated the rest of the year, and we reactivate it the next year. Our board pretty much has a policy in place, a practice for us that, except on very rare occasions, these facilities are not used on Sunday. And so we have everybody's access card, with the exception of a few, set so that people can't get in here on Sunday. They're only active Monday through Saturday. So if somebody comes up here and tries to swipe to get into the gym or something, they're not able to do that. The only people that are getting in here on Sundays regularly are custodians that come to do building checks to make sure everything is functioning, we don't have any problems, that when they check on that stuff. So that system has worked well. I think it's helped to alleviate the issues that were, like I said, perceived to be there. Drills, as far as safety and security go, our buildings practice lockdown drills. Beginning of the year, the sheriff's department's out here monitoring what actually happens during a lockdown drill. They give us feedback on how we run that. Tornado and fire drills also, especially at the beginning of the year. The local fire departments are here giving us their feedback as those happen, and then that type of stuff happens periodically throughout the year so that our students know where to go, what to do if we're ever in a situation like that. And we continue to work closely with the county, especially the sheriff's office. There's a program, a new method for dealing with lockdown type situations that they call ALICE, which is short for something. And we're going to be working with the sheriff's department and the other schools in the county to go through the ALICE training and then train those people here so that we can be all on the same page for the sheriff's department when they come out here to respond if there ever were to be an emergency, or any other school in the district. You know, another thing, I think it started a few years back, or at least the way that it's done, and it was revised a little bit mid-year this year, but on the safety end of things, we have at the elementary school a very stringent procedure that's gone through if students are going to be placed anywhere else besides on a bus. The bus process itself is pretty stringent too, but if somebody's going to come in and try to pick up a student in a car, or if somebody's going to try to sign them out early, there's a very detailed process that they have to go. We're not just giving kids to anybody. As far as transportation side of things goes, we have 17 drivers and 4 aides. We need every one of those. Matter of fact, when we made this consolidation into the one route in January, we actually had to hire a driver because we weren't able to do one route with the drivers that we had. So we added a driver to be able to do that, to make sure that the kids were safe and secure on the bus, which is our first priority. And then we have 4 aides. Aides, this kind of gets into these rules too. Things that people don't usually know about transportation are that there's a lot of rules that do have to be followed. For example, when we have a student that has an identified learning disability that needs, determined through their IEP team, needs to have an aide on a bus or a one-to-one aide, that's the district's responsibility to provide that. So these aides are on special education buses, and they're responsible for certain students where that's written into a student's IEP. That's what they do. So we don't have a choice whether we have those or not. Once something is provided for in an IEP, the district has the responsibility to do that. Other things that you may not know about transportation that come up a lot, you hear, why do you transport people to St. Joe's? We don't have a choice. Nothing against St. Joe's, but we are responsible for the students that live within the boundaries of this district to transport. And if we feel for some reason that we cannot transport, then we have to go through a process through the Ohio Department of Education and the Board of Education of our own, through resolutions, to deem a student's transportation impractical. Usually that's if it's over 30 minutes away. If it's over 30 minutes away, we don't have a responsibility, but somebody can challenge that. And then the state will come in and do an official time trial. And if it's over 30 minutes away, we're off the hook. If it's under 30 minutes away, then we can deem them impractical and offer payment in lieu of transportation. And if we don't do that, then we're responsible for providing that transportation to them. There's rules at the federal level, the McKinney-Vento Act, that says that if a student goes homeless while they're in your district, regardless of where they move, the district that they were last in when they went homeless is responsible for transporting. So we can have and have had situations where students have been in this district and have gone homeless, are deemed homeless through the proper agencies, and then move maybe 20 or 25 minutes away and want to stay at Waterloo. Waterloo's responsible for sending a bus or a van out to get those students and transporting them back and forth every day. Waterloo doesn't have a choice in that, nor does any other school district. Now, there are provisions where the district that they're now residing in has to help share in those costs, but that's still a responsibility for us, and that's still money that our district is paying out. So within transportation, there are all kinds of parameters that we as a district have to work with, and all kinds of things that whether we like it or not, whether we think it's right or wrong, it's irrelevant. It's the way that the law is written, whether it's at the state level or the federal level. PI money, we do not have a permanent improvement levy anymore. That expired some years ago. The money that is left in that PI fund was designated by the board a while back to be used to do bus purchases. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that we had some interest that was gained on the project here, and we were able to transfer that interest into the PI money. So basically, the money that's in our permanent improvement project is money that was left from interest off of this building project that happened. And the board a while back designated that for bus purchases to keep on top of where we're at with that. So that, at the moment, because we've had money cut back from the state that we used to get for bus purchases, we no longer get, do we get that at all? We no longer get any of that money that we used to get from the state, so it has to come from somewhere. So this is where we've designated that. As far as the cost per year, just to give you an idea of what transportation services cost Waterloo, by the time you add in everything, we're looking at a cost of most years averaging about $900,000 when it's all said and done. There's some years that it's been higher, and there's some years that it's been a little bit lower, but if we take an average, 900,000 is probably a very fair number to give. So that's kind of the overview of that, and I wanted to just touch on this because those of you that have been part of this, we've been talking about this, so I just want to give you the most up-to-date information we have. This is about the budget, the state of Ohio budget, and there's actually two different things that you're going to see here. One is the governor's proposed budget, which came out in March, and the other one is this amended House proposal, which was passed through the House about maybe 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. I think it was 2 weeks this coming Thursday. And it's in the Senate now. The Senate's doing testimony on it, and they expect the Senate to vote on whatever they're going to pass through somewhere around the first week of June. And then between the House and the Senate amending all of their bills, that the amendment that they've made to it, trying to come to a conclusion together, they still expect this to be done by June 30th, so we're still in limbo. But just to show you the two things here that we're dealing with at the moment with what we know, and again, the bottom line is this is uncertain, but this is where it stands. The governor's overall proposal for next year cut our funding a total of $565,000 from where we currently stand this year. So this is just state aid, the amount of state aid that we're losing from this fiscal year 11 to fiscal year 12. The amended House proposal actually does us about $16,000 better. So now we're losing about $549,000 from where we currently stand this year. To put that in relation for you, we budgeted for a 10% decrease. If these numbers stand, That's a little less than what we had budgeted for when we reduced that 950,000 throughout the course of this year for next. As far as fiscal year 13 goes, because remember the state does these in biennium budgets 2 years at a time, the governor's proposal, when we look at fiscal year 13, and again, this number here is in relation to the current fiscal year we're in, 11. So in fiscal year 13, the 12-13 school year, in the governor's proposal, we're about 709,000 less than where we currently are with state funding. In the amended House proposal, we're $672,000 less. So we picked up about $36,000 to the positive for us in the difference between what the governor originally put out and what the House voted on and sent to the Senate. So it still remains to be seen where exactly all of this will end up when it's all said and done. But we're starting to get a picture of where we think we're going to be. So I think that's all that I have as far as a formal presentation goes. I'd be more than happy now to listen to questions, comments, suggestions within any of these areas or on anything else, quite honestly. You took the time to come out here tonight. If there's things that don't fall into these categories, we're happy to listen and talk about those too. So I'll just turn it over. I might turn this camera around here. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, quite a few. On your state budget, you referred back. They came up with a certain amount of money. You're talking about it's in the House now, or the House passes.
Yes.
What amount was that?
For us?
No, I mean for the
whole state? I don't remember. It was something like, I could be wrong
Was
on
it in
this.
the billions?
It was in the millions. I believe it was somewhere, it was either 40 or 80 million dollars more they found. And if I understand it right, they say that they were able to add that because the sales tax money coming in was more than they anticipated.
That's why I heard you. So that'll be, was that including the townships too? They had
No, I think the number that I quoted was strictly how much they gave the schools. They did give some additional money from what I understand to
depending on
local
how
government.
poor the school system was. Because I heard they had quite a bit of input from a lot of the school districts, plus a lot of the townships. Like today I was listening to up here in Cleveland, where they're going to get rid of 400 some personnel.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that place could run even Athens anymore. Just amazing. Going back to when they built the school, I probably attended all the meetings. I talked to you about why I didn't vote for that school levy at that time, but they used non-union people in there. And at that time, nobody really stuck up for the union, even though we had almost everybody in the school system were union. And they did protest out there one day, they put it in the paper and a big thing.
They were half union when it first happened on.
Yeah, that was a lot of them, but the trade I was in, I lived here all my whole life, so all my kids here, never got the opportunity to work. And at that time, we had 100, I know they threw the bids in, and wasn't too many contractors bid on for some reason. But when they went through on the final, some of the things they did, but I guess the number one issue in this school system is the roof system.
Yes.
My son works in Akron, he's in charge of all those school systems, where they put almost all those schools. They put the slanted roof on, and some of them they tore up over in the field schools district, so they had to tear that off, and they had to tear some others off because it wasn't properly intended at that time. But it's an ongoing thing.
It is.
I mean, you go down and walk down, I think it replaced before you got here. A lot of the tiles were damaged up through there, and they were soiled.
Yes.
And I went into walk through different areas there. They had a walkthrough, and every school system I ever worked in the bathrooms, they always had a exhaust fan the men's and women's restroom. Well, down in that one area where I think my wife works, I used that bathroom and I brought it to somebody's attention. But there is no, you look up there, I swear, there is no exhaust fan in that either restroom, I think. Why somebody never ever picked that up? But I think is the ones we worked in. I know some of them we put on timers, so when the person occupied that came into the school system, that I call Maggie would come on and time out at the end of the day.
Okay. We'll look
I don't know
at
if there's something you can check on why, if it's not booked in or they just
it. Didn't put it, I'll take a look.
put it in. You know what I'm talking about, I think.
Over in the office area.
That's back there with.
Down where all those offices, or the offices
I
are.
mean, I've heard some complaints about somebody who used that down there. It's not been anything.
Okay, we will definitely look at that.
No problem, but, what you think you save on, since you probably already tell, the miles, the bus went out on the 2 routes, that had to be, I know you, a lot of savings there, but to replace a bus. I mean, before you used to run the 2 shifts, you probably won't, or two routes,
Yes.
so the one you ran 2, then the nighttime you ran 2. There have to be a lot of savings just on the mile.
On the miles on the
That
bus.
bus.
That's not something we factored those savings in, but not on, if you're asking about, are you getting at, we may not have to replace buses as often? Is that what you're saying?
Just like if a person broke on the, say if you worked in Akron compared to, 5 miles away, you've got your miles down in half.
That's not something that was part of our, we factored in the cost savings on mileage, but we didn't factor in
Well,
whether.
as
we
far
were-
as the engine savings goes, it's going to be a savings on, the lifespan of your engines and things of that, but it's, most of the times, you get into problems with salt on the roads, and it's the bodies that don't hold up. And then, of course, we have the yearly state inspection from the State Highway Patrol. And depending on how those, inspections go, I mean, we do what we need to do to have our buses pass, so they're up to safety standards. But ultimately, it's usually the body that doesn't outlast the motor, when we have to replace buses.
One time we replaced 1 or 2 buses every.
Well, you figure we had, 18, 19, 20 buses in the fleet,
Right.
and if you don't, if you're not on a program to replace 1 bus or 2 buses every year.
Now that's
and, last case scenario you want to be in is, you have an antiquated bus fleet, and then you're faced with buying maybe 9, 10 buses at a time, you just can't do it. So some years we buy 1, other years we've been able to find some good used buses out there, maybe buy 2 used buses, but we just try to keep the fleet as updated as we can.
I mean, Ken, since the problem with the school now, can you replace the buses?
Well,
Like we were doing before.
as Andy mentioned earlier, Dr. Hill mentioned earlier, we have the interest money that we got from the project got transferred over to the permanent improvement fund. And the board has earmarked that to designate for bus purposes to keep our fleet up as we can. We used to get up to $58,000 a year from the state just for bus replacement. And over the years, it's gone down, down. Now we get nothing.
We should clarify too, when that interest, I wasn't here, so I'm not an expert on this, but when that interest got transferred, it's not like the district could transfer it anywhere they wanted to. That money couldn't go into the general fund to just offset revenue. There was certain parameters of how that money could be spent, and then it was decided that within those parameters, it was best to put it into that PI fund because that allowed the most flexibility for that money,
For
correct?
permanent improvement.
Yes.
And because that levy did not pass, so it didn't happen.
Right.
Well, and also, whenever, we're talking, when Todd says 58,000, I got on board 8 years ago, and we got $58,000 a year.
No, they
And it's zero now. No, it's zero. There's nothing. So, that's how quick. And it just dropped, was it last year, 2 years ago, it was 12,000.
Or,
It just.
from 58 to 40s
They
to
just take.
13 to.
I mean, as with all of this stuff, if you've seen, it seems like everything that we're getting from the state continues to shrink.
These numbers that Dr. Hill showed tonight, these are the big items. you know, the basic state aid. These are the big tickets, but there's all these other little areas too, such as the bus reimbursement and other areas that we just slowly get chipped away at, little by little by little.
I never went on how many super tents. I don't know if you even heard. One time, didn't they pay for almost a whole bus for biggest part?
Well, I think, I look back over, you know, the history since I've been here, the highest year, the highest reimbursement that we received was $58,000.
What did the bus cost?
80.
Not sure. You know, that question, I got a couple more. On lockdown,
Yes.
you said something about some kind of classes that.
Yeah, Alice training, it's alert, I did not
Okay, is that the
bring,
same thing they did? 'Cause my wife was one of the coordinators of it. She said when she came back, they had different codes. When something drastically happened, they had to lock down. She said that it was a big, almost a big joke. She had this great big handbook. She said, I must have not even went to the classes. Lynn Jones come up, some of the other secretaries. There's a procedure, that's when they have to walkie-talkie, and she would call back and give a color or a code out. And she said it's almost, I don't know if that's the same thing you're talking about.
now this is different. There's a movement within, I guess, law enforcement that, and I did not bring this paperwork, I'm going to talk a little bit about this Thursday, or tomorrow night rather, at our Board of Education meeting, so I will have the paper with me at that point, and I wish I had it tonight. ALIS stands for, it's alert, or it's alert, lockdown, and then I can't remember what the ICE stands for. But there's this movement that schools, K through 12 and college level, they're trying to move towards, and our county is trying to get everybody on board with the same thing, partially because they're afraid of, with how big our county is and the cutbacks that they're having to do too. You know, they think it could take up to 20 minutes if somebody happened to not be down in this area for somebody to actually get here in an emergency situation. And so as a result, there's this whole new philosophy and training that these police forces are going through that they would like to see implemented in the schools. And basically the old approach, the way that I understand it, listening to Sheriff Doak talk about it, used to be, and still is right now, that when there's a lockdown situation, you lock everybody in, you get under the tables, you're quiet, you don't evacuate any of the building even if you can. But because of what's happened with these things, and they say that people that do this go in and cause these problems know that that's what people are taught to do. Because of that, there's this whole new movement and training where they work on evacuating sections of the building if they can. And if an intruder were to come in, people are taught to attack the intruder, to go for the eyes, there's just this whole training that goes with it that they think makes much more sense than sitting hoping that they don't come up and knowing in your gut that it's not right as you're sitting there and they're approaching you. So we're in the initial stages with this, as to my understanding is all of the schools in the county are, so we can all get on the same page with this. And the initial kickoff will be a couple-day training for certain district personnel that'll happen in August. I think the sheriff's goal is to have all of this in place for the 12-13 school year, not next year. So there will be a transition period with all of this.
Okay, but at this thing right now, say, you have an irate parent comes in and holds somebody hostage. Is there a procedure that you would, or a student? And one time did come in and saw him sitting out there. He got into the school, went down to the high school because there was something. It was like 3 or 4 years. Is there a procedure?
There's a procedure. We have a district safety plan that's,
At least I don't have any knowledge of that. I hadn't heard.
we have a district safety plan that's in place. When something like that happens, immediately go into lockdown. And when it's in lockdown, classroom doors are locked, people are moved away from the windows, blinds are closed, things are put up over the windows.
How do the teachers get up there? Through the PA system? Or
Yes.
what's already set up?
Yeah.
But I remember this board meeting, people here, this place used to be filled there, like a year ago or when Bob was here. Upset people about a lot of them. They, at that time, used that word that thing, right? Came over every, all the doors locked, they wanted, you had to ring in, you can get in the building, and some board members that were impractical to do that, you know, hire somebody. You would take the responsibility with your, you know.
You're probably referring to outside of just a, when I say lockdown, we're talking like an intruder in the building. It almost sounds like what you're talking about is the whole philosophy of whether all the doors should be locked on a regular basis so people need to be buzzed in. We have, yeah, there's only 2 doors. There's one over here and one on the elementary middle school door that are open. The rest of the doors around the campus are supposed to be locked on a regular basis
You
once
think
the
the
school day
procedure that
starts.
you put in with the, when a person opens up that door and that thing buzzes, did that? Have you seen it? I mean,
You talking, so we have 4 doors, I'll clarify on that. We have 4 doors in the back of this high school here, off of the locker rooms, the weight room, and at the end of the band hallway. That when, during the school day, when they're activated, if somebody exits those doors, there's an alarm that sounds. And we did that because we were having some issues with students sneaking out those doors, for lack of a better term, because that's where the parking lot is, or propping those doors open when they go in to change for gym, to run out to their car and get something. So we've done that, and I think that has helped. Students definitely were not happy about that back in the fall when those first went in. So I would say, just judging by their reaction, they probably were effective. Would be the best way to say it.
I know I hate it when I'm trying to bring stuff in.
I forgot that they were on one day and it went off on me, and then it works off.
I went through that gym area, walked out that site, went to the gym and went off. It wasn't doing the job.
Yeah, it's loud. When it goes off, it's loud, and it draws attention quickly. Anybody else, any other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
In the last presentation that I was at, I'm not sure if I missed it, you had a list of so many teachers that were going to be let go at
Yes.
10% and it's not 20%.
Yes.
And I assume you had informed everybody on the list
Yes.
so they could get new employment.
Yes.
And so have you made a decision as to whether all of those?
Not until we know what's happening here.
Okay.
What we've
It's still
done,
up in the air.
it's still up in the air. What we've done is, I believe there was a total, that list that you're referring to had 25 people on it. And back in March, somewhere around March 15th or 16th, I met with each of them, with their union president and the principal of wherever the building was, to let them know what was going on, to let them know where they fell on that list, to let them know what the likelihood of being recalled would be. But because of the contractual timeframes we were up against, we had to officially have the board take action in April to be able to lay them off. So if we wouldn't have taken action in April, and then we found out that the state drastically changed our numbers in July, we would not have been able to go back and further reduce because we missed contractual deadlines. So we did all of that in April, and 13 of those people are dependent on the state budget. The other 12 of those people are dependent on the state budget. The other 13 are tutors that are dependent on the federal budget, and we're still waiting on that too. Those tutors are affected by Title VI-B money for special education and Title I money. And so there's some indication that it sounds like those levels have been frozen. The federal government appears to be on a little bit of a different timeline. I don't know as much about them as I do the state. But from what I can tell, it sounds like their new fiscal year that they'll be working on a budget for starts in November. And I'm not sure why that is. But for the rest of this fiscal year, with what I was reading, they've frozen the levels to the beginning of November at the levels for those programs that they were at this current year. So we should be getting some indication in July where that money stands for the tutors for the federal stuff. But apparently that could change once November rolls around and they actually get into revising the budget again. I don't know if that was an extension. That came out of that whole thing where there was almost a shutdown of the federal government a month ago or a few weeks ago. And this was the agreement that came about to keep the government operating. So we don't know. Our hope, though, if everything works out like we think it will right now, we may very well be able to recall or recommend to the board to recall 23 of those 25 people, which would be a great thing. You know, we've put ourselves in a position to be able to do that with all of the other things that have been done to eliminate that money for next school year. If something doesn't change, though, we're going to have a major problem in our hands for the 12-13 school year, which is where I guess additional levy requests come up at some point. Does that answer the question?
Any ideas on what the next strategy for the next meeting is in November?
Now, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about that at the board meeting tomorrow night. We don't officially, depending on what type of an issue would be placed on the ballot, we pretty much have until some point at the earliest in July, at the latest, the beginning of August, to actually have all the resolutions passed and stuff into the Board of Elections for November. The board did decide at their meeting last month that they were not going to place something on the August ballot.
Is it typically better to wait until there's more issues? Is that why they allow?
Now, we looked into this because we had some questions on how all of this payment works. And what we were told was, in even number years, they can only charge off the cost of advertising in the actual ballots. In odd number years, they're allowed to charge off the cost of everything. And then it just depends on how many issues are actually on the ballot. So, primary election here in May, we're going to be paying money for what that was. The general election back in November, we're paying money for that one too. So we pay every time it's on, but the dollar amounts fluctuate. And they gave me an estimate of what it would be if we were on in August versus November. And August was like half of the cost of November. It may have been, and these are off the top of my head, I may not be right, I don't have that with me, but I reported at the last board meeting, it was like 5,000 in August versus 2,500 in November, something along those lines.
Did the ratio improve any? I forget what the final was.
6%. We went from 68 to 32 the first in November to 62, 38 this time. So we made a little bit of improvement, but nowhere near as much as we would have hoped to.
Why did Woodstown, they haven't found all the votes up there, right?
Yeah, they had, last I knew, it was like 40 provisional ballots out.
That, I mean, from what I've heard, that school system's been financial work problems and a lot of, I mean, when you let the word come out on it.
Yeah, that's what
Why would that school, and that was their second time too, right?
now that's like their fourth or fifth time. I think it was their fourth. They've been, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the fourth. And they had, I want to even say November or last summer, their percentages were around where ours are. Now it's a 21 vote difference, you know, and so I don't know what that gets attributed to. You know, if it's the things that they had that they were going to be implementing if it didn't pass, if it's the fact that it keeps coming back, I don't know.
Okay, the rumor that I heard that up there in Woodstown, just like the spring of the county was also going to do this, but they're levy, I think both the counties before it goes back. It was going to go to 5 hours. There would be no study halls in Bear River. I heard Woodstown going to be saying that. I said, what do you think of that? He said, well, looks like the little mommies and daddies going to have to go out and buy themselves a babysitter, because that's what I am, a professional babysitter. That's what I look at as my job. You know, you got to babysit these kids. If we send them home after 5 hours, they'll be leaving at school. No lunch, no study hall, nothing. They'll be going home on that bus at like 12:30 or 1, their day is in.
Yeah, the material that they put out for their levy indicated, again, this is Rootstown, indicated that if they did not pass the levy, that they would be going to state minimum hours for school. So that's a little different depending on which age level you're talking. I think it's 5 for one, and I forget, maybe 5.5 for other, depending on what age.
How does that work with the teachers' pay and stuff?
I don't know. We have not looked at that here for Waterloo, so I couldn't
just don't
say.
understand the
I'm not
actual-
I'm not sure.
You would wipe out, just discussing that today, the total cafeteria, you don't have to feed the kids unless you have that morning breakfast that the kids get, you eliminate the lunch break. So that whole all those personnel in the cafeteria, you know, all the aides, you would need aides up. Do we still have aides out the playground?
We do. You know, an interesting thing, and it hasn't fallen under any category that we've touched upon here with these forums, and that's probably an oversight on my part. But our cafeteria, our cafeteria actually holds its own. We do not lose any money on the cafeteria here at Waterloo. Doris Mills and the ladies that run that do a fantastic job with that. And so our cafeteria is not an expense for us, because we've had a number of people that have talked about different suggestions of what we could do with that area. And that's one of the few areas that really we don't have to take a long, hard look at, because it's holding its own and actually bringing some in.
And just to follow up on that, in other words, when Dr. Hill says that, we don't spend any general fund money for our cafeteria employees. There's no operating money goes towards the cafeteria. So whether we had a cafeteria or not, these numbers that we're looking at, or possible reductions, things of that nature, that would have no bearing whatsoever on these numbers for this year and 5-year forecast.
That House bill, go back to this one. The
Yeah.
House bill, that House bill passed.
This one here? This one that I was talking about?
Well,
This-
one.
This is 153, and this is,
No, the one that.
You mean the Senate Bill 5?
you're talking Senate Bill 5?
Senate Bill 5?
The one,
SB 5.
the one that may be up for referendum?
Okay. From what I heard, that thing does, it's not going to be, go into effect this year. Sure.
So there's 90 days after it gets signed into law before it can officially become the law. And that is somewhere around July 1st. In the meantime, if they're able to achieve enough registered voters, and there's a very intricate system that's set up with how many signatures are needed from registered voters throughout the state, but you also have to have so many from each of the counties too. If they're able to achieve that before July 1st, then it's on hold, held in abeyance until the election takes place. So the law as it currently was and currently is right now, because the new law that was officially signed by Governor Kasich, even though it's the new law, it's not in effect until those 90 days pass. So if they're able to get the signatures that are needed before July 1st or whatever that date is for 90 days, then it will be held in abeyance, which means the current law will stay in effect until the voters decide. And the way that I understand it is, if the voters decide to uphold Senate Bill 5, then it automatically takes effect once the votes are finalized. That being said, everything that's in there, or at least the way that I understand it all, does not supersede contracts that are currently in place. It's for things as you move forward. So for a district like Waterloo, we just entered into new one-year agreements with each union because they were all up. So for us, that would not necessarily affect us, because if it's the law by then, that'll just be part of what happens next spring when we go back to negotiations.
Going back to that there, if that thing would get repealed, there was a 1%, and you only have a one-year contract, with the step raises and things like this, be still in their contracts?
Everything that's currently in there would still be in there, and those would all have to be negotiated items.
Okay, I saw something today. Today the kids had what did you refer to?
Waiver day.
What day?
Waiver day?
I remember you talking about it. It's the first time they ever did this in the schools, right?
Here, yes.
We had one in Bedford.
Well, we had,
Okay, there's my question too. A kid has to go to school 185 days through.
100, it's 182.
Okay, is these 2 days that they don't go, is that taken off 182?
Yes, that's why it's called a waiver.
So that kid only goes 180.
Yeah, actually, when you get into the 182 days in a calendar, kids actually go 178. 4 of those days,
Plus-
two of those are parent-teacher
But really upset
conferences.
me, I saw 2 kids walking up on Marley Road there. I mean, that's maybe, that'd be beneficial, being in the school system. For 5 snow days that we lost, plus the 2 waiver days, that's 7. That's 7 days that those kids were not in school. I, as a taxpayer, go back to the same thing. If I had kids in school, I said, my kids aren't getting an education, there's 7 days that you will never, you're never gonna get that back. Because they said at the end of the school year, it's a waste of time going to school. Because it's, you know, kids are all hypered up, ready to go home. Well, they've already lost 7. How do you make the 7 days up? There's no possible way. If I was building this school and I had 7 rain days, plus half my construction crew didn't, because I gave them personal days off, I gave them sick days off, thing would never get built. Is the sick days for personnel going to stay the same?
Yes.
Sometimes I talk to the wrong people, with my son, and he just absolutely said, Dad, that's in the contract.
Actually, sick days are in the Ohio Revised Code.
That is statewide, right?
Statewide, and that's actually part of what's been adjusted in Senate Bill 5, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember where that adjustment goes. I think it actually takes out the mandatory, was it 1.5 a month, and leaves it up to the school board, if I'm not mistaken, to actually determine how much is given. It does that with pretty much all of these different types of leave. What I recall reading through that, it seems to leave it up to the district. Back to your point about the waiver days. Yeah, I think when we do those, you try to balance what you're talking about with, at the same time, being able to provide professional development for the teachers to be able to do things here that may be more effective for the learning of the student. And so you try to come to that balance of what it is, and no one wants to give up instructional days, but what may be gained by doing so may be more valuable to the students when they're here. As far as the snow day thing goes, you know, Governor Strickland tried to fix that, and that was quickly, and the intent was that over a period of time it would go down to 0. And that was quickly overturned here in the last few months. Right or wrong, I don't know. Personally, my viewpoint on it is I think they need to go to hours for a school year instead of days. And that would completely eliminate the whole need for any kind of makeup days for calamity. And it would give districts that are in financial problems other options that they could look into, because we've talked about a number of times at these forums over the last 5 months. Why don't you go to 4 days, work weeks and student weeks? And that may cost, or that may actually save the district some money. There's states where I have a friend in New Jersey that does that. And they're able to do that because they're on hours instead of days. Here in Ohio, we'd have to make up those days. And if we take 36 days and make those up, we're pretty much giving back over the summer, coming in here, what we saved to go to 4-day weeks. So personally, my personal take on it, and I've shared it with Todd McKinney, is that they ought to be looking at moving to hours instead of days. And you get around that problem. You know, there's a lot of districts that are well over what the state minimum is as far as the hours go.
and a school day seems to be such an arbitrary thing. We can delay 2 hours, like we've done this year, and have school, and it counts as a full day.
But I think that system there works, 2 hours a day works 100% better than
It does.
giving a full day.
But it goes back to the argument that a school day is just such an arbitrary thing. You know, there's no, other than physically being present and having a minimum number of hours, you can still shorten it by 2 and do all of these other things, and it's still considered a day.
How many personal days does a person here at Works of Already get?
3 each year.
You already know it. How many sick days?
Sick days, it's 1.5 a month that they accumulate, right? So it's 15 a year.
This was the thing, an administrator up in Cleveland got paid. I don't know if they retired or what. They put everything into it. When he retired, he got paid. It was a ridiculous amount of money. It was 25 people, maybe you heard that. 25 people got paid.
Yeah.
Then they wonder why the school system, the state of Ohio, the 600 and some school districts, their financial problems.
Yeah, part of Senate Bill 5 caps the amount that can be paid out in severance type payments like that. And that's part of what is built in there. And I'm trying to remember what those exact provisions were. It's capped at something like 1,000 hours or something.
I can get it, but I was never working on anything where we worked on it, never. You took off for 2 hours, you would doctor. You went to the doctor, you could doc 3 hours in the afternoon, you didn't. You didn't go first day or go to the doctor, bring back to you.
Yeah, I think there's, some of you were at the board meeting, I don't know if it was last month, I think it was last month, maybe the month before, where Dave Bolton came and had that fact sheet from the Tea Party of Portage County, and was upset about it because there was so many things on there that were distorted or weren't the truth. And after looking that over, I called and had a conversation with Tom Zwickowski. I'm not sure if that's how you say his last name. I had a conversation with him for a pretty lengthy period of time because, in my estimation, and the stuff that I pulled off with Ohio Revised Code and stuff, a lot of the stuff that was portrayed on that position paper, I'll call it, it was not true. And when we talk about the things like you're talking about now, a lot of those things, not all of them, but a lot of those things are tied back into stuff that local school districts have no control over. They're things that are written into the Ohio Revised Code that we have no choice about. So what gets portrayed as a, look what my local school district is doing as a wasteful situation, is actually something that's much bigger than your local school district. Now, that's not the case everywhere. I'd be the first to admit that. I'm sure that there are things in districts that have crazy stuff in there that nowhere is found in revised code that are perks that they've decided to give. But a lot of these things, like these days that you're talking about, you can go back and find where at in the Ohio Revised or Ohio Administrative Code all of that basis comes from. And we don't have a choice. And so
it's mandated back.
Yeah, it is. And so it puts local school districts in a position because people get fired up about it, but there's nothing that we can really do to do anything about that. It's not decisions that were made locally in many of the cases.
Another rumor was going around, which I think I found out was true. Some of these teachers, not downgrade teachers, but I got a couple, 2 or 3 of them. But when it comes to you, the taxpayer, and you wonder why the seniors aren't passing things, I will never vote for the thing. We're not getting the money. I told you that before. And I went down there one day, and I thought, I tell you who that went in there was Martin Goodrich. Remember, he showed up that night at one farm. He started the conversation. I walked out there and I walked in. It was awful. One of the guys said, "You used to take your school levy." He said, "We're on limited income on Social Security, and we haven't had a raise for 3 years, and there's no way." And that's what you get. That's all. I said, well, you guys come over to the meeting, he wants to talk to you seniors. You can sit there and you won't yell at the screen at him. I just, wow, unbelievable.
It's a rough time right now. It really is. And, yeah, I think the best thing that we can do is just get the facts out there. Whether the facts are favorable for us or not, facts are the facts, and we need to make sure that people have accurate facts that they can draw conclusions from, not distorted viewpoints on things. I had a good conversation with that Tom, and talked through a lot of those things, and we'll see what happens
Did you win
with
him
that
over
stuff.
though?
I don't know. I don't know.
Considering the fact that we got a robocall on Sunday from a guy that lives in Randolph saying, don't vote for our levy, I would say that we didn't win him over. So,
Yeah,
I would venture to say that, he is still the enemy.
Now I got yours. I don't know. When I first heard that, I thought there was somebody on the board talking, about vote for the levy. And he just totally missed it.
The beginning I thought it was.
And they said he went to school here. Well, if I remember right, he lived down the road from me, but I thought that whole family left the whole school there. I mean, heck, he ever came from.
There's a lot of stuff that goes way beyond politics with that guy. There's ultimate reasons. This administration is out to destroy the public school system, period.
Plus union.
It's the unions, yes, but it's easier to go after the teachers and stuff like that. And there's one reason, because the unions normally back the Democrats.
Right.
All right, and he didn't get the union backing, and they've got him on tape. It's on YouTube. Look it up, where he says, "I will destroy every union in the state of Ohio," and he's doing it with lies and deception and being a typical politician. And they can get away with it. They can say anything they want and get away with it. So
They've taken, within this House bill, this 153, the budget bill, they've incorporated many pieces from the education standpoint that are also included in Senate Bill 5. They've taken many of those things and rolled them into, they say, I'm no expert on this, but they say that this budget is the most policy-laden budget that anybody's ever seen. It's just swamped with policy changes.
And that didn't happen until everybody started griping about this, and he said, okay, I'll fix them, I'll put it into the budget, where they can't do a referendum and they can't touch it. There's over 1,000 amendments in that budget already. Over 1,000. So.
And, and some of them are little and some of them are huge. I mean, they apparently have amended to reduce the accountability that was already reduced for charter schools.
And one of his biggest political supporters is David Brennan, the guy that owns White Hat, the corporation that has, how many schools do they run?
He's got a lot.
It's over 200, I think.
Yeah, it's a good number of schools.
It's
So
politics.
it's an interesting thing that's happening right now at a very difficult time economically for people in this area included. And so it creates interesting dynamics for us to work within. And what I've been trying to share and get the word out about is we've put ourselves in a position with things that have happened this year to be able to get through this upcoming school year. Most likely, with recalling these people, we'll be able to get through in a way that's going to not look too dramatically different than what was here for our students this year. So that's a win for Waterloo. But at the same time, we have another huge cliff that's looming very quickly for the 12-13 school year. And so while we can continue to move forward with all the things that we're trying to do for the students here, we have to continue to go back in this climate that we're in with all of these different things that are happening at the state level, at the federal level, at our local level, and try to continue to ask our community to step forward and support us because whether we want to do that or not, this school board, as far as I'm concerned, has no choice. They have to. If we don't pass in November, we're looking at somewhere between 750 and 800,000 of additional cuts for the 12-13 school year, on top of the 950 that have already been done. And that's going to completely decimate this district. Unless there's some huge revenue source that comes in that we're not aware of, that is going to decimate Waterloo. And the board has no choice, again, in my opinion, than to go back and ask the taxpayers for money, because right or wrong, it's the way the state system is set up. That's it. The state system relies heavily on local support. And at the same time, districts that rely heavily on the state, like us, at 60%, we're getting cut every which way we possibly can, which is only making it worse for the local taxpayer, who's already in a pinch and crunch to begin with, like the people you're talking about, Rick. And so it's just it's a no-win situation. It just creates an evil cycle. And I don't know how you get out of that. You know, but we're going to continue to move forward and continue to try to find the right levy approach with how we go about, you know, going after this one in November, provided the board decides to do that. You know, we just have to keep going back, and we have to keep trying to educate the community on the facts, and most importantly, we need to get people to get involved. We need to get people to be engaged, and whether they want to come out to meetings like this, or whether they just want to talk amongst themselves, we had 1,700 people show up out of 5,600 registered voters on May 3rd. So we need people in this community to somehow get a fire lit to actually go out and do something. And with, as far as the vote goes, and we need to somehow reach those people, and not sure how to do that. We've been trying many different things, and I'm sure there'll be other different things that we try, and how to reach the people that don't want to be reached, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, we just all fear it, they don't want to.
So we'll continue to do that, but I think the only way that that's probably going to happen is for you to go out and talk to people, and I'm sure you're doing that. And I'm sure the others in here are too, but I'm sure when you walk into those situations.
Some people you waste your time on, but you know, they're all really set. You know, it amazes me though, that it just, I don't have no kids. Why would I want to go my tax up the rest of my life? Can't be why.
Well, but if you don't have a
They
school
have
system
people think
here
property value, how-
all the
Oh, yeah.
time, it's not here when your kids are in school.
That's right. So, I mean, there's 1,000,001 reasons that.
But the end result though, when you see a kid that leaves there and goes into 4-year degree and successful and makes something out of himself, he's not supportive of the community. You know, just like where I lived down there, I saw 5 people, we were under the government, 1 girl pregnant. I will have to pay, as a taxpayer, pay for her probably independent children. The mother doesn't work, we pay to her. There's like 5 people just in one area. That makes you sick out of it, you know, but if they would have got an education. You know, all you gotta do is look at a person. What do you work at? You didn't apply yourself in high school, did you? What did you do? The guy said, work your goodwill. I said, you think you're ever gonna better yourself? I'm gonna go to college. You don't have a chance. You goofed off in high school, at that time, you didn't apply yourself, now you want somebody to take care of your rest of your life. It makes it unbelievable.
What time's the board meeting? 7?
Board meeting is tomorrow night at 7:30.
7:30.
We did pass a resolution to start them at 7, and they're typically the second Thursday of every month. But this month, we had 2 members out of town last Thursday, so the meeting is actually tomorrow night. And because of the special time, it's actually at 7:30 instead of this new 7 o'clock start time. But that meeting will be right in here at 7:30 tomorrow night.
I got a question on, you say these roofs, so I'm around that. Does that guarantee with the roofing? How long did, on that construction of the building, did you have?
Was it 20 years,
The
Todd?
fiber tight the rubberized membrane, which has a 20-year warranty.
Is that the problem with it up there?
No, it's the.
We have some issues, we have some issues with that.
But those are covered under the warranty.
In this metal roof, we have a warranty on that too, but that warranty is only on the metal and if it were to rust through. And our problems aren't with rusting through of that metal, our problems are wherever this water is running and it's touching flashing and other stuff, it's leaking through. And it really makes it hard when these companies come out here to locate exactly where the problem is. They think they get it, and then we get hit with rain, and then all of a sudden the same areas are leaking. But then because we have to keep up with these ceiling tiles, like you mentioned before, we're changing those out, and then they're getting destroyed again the next time. It's just a bad cycle. So we're looking into some things to see what we can do, because it is a persistent problem that has been a problem. And I don't know what we're going to be able to come up with, but we're looking into some things.
Andy, when you said transportation, the annual cost of $900,000 a year, that's the new number, right? That's after the cut?
Now, that's what we traditionally paid, so we did not factor in
So it's less.
those new numbers. It'll be less because we're saving roughly $200,000, $185,000 a year. Those are the old numbers. We went with the last full averages of the last so many fiscal years that we've had on record.
So it might not be completely 200,000 less because you're
No.
going on an average.
Yeah, that's right. Any other questions? Ideas or anything that we should consider?
I just like to say one thing. You know, here at Waterloo, it's kind of unique because along with our maintenance of our facilities, you know, like Rootstown and some other areas, school districts, you know, here since we're out in the rural area, we have a tremendous drinking water plant that's back here that most people probably never stepped foot into. And then we have that wastewater treatment plant out back.
Okay, go back to drinking water, you mean the new well system?
Yeah, I mean, there's, how many softeners in our wastewater, in our drinking water plant? You know, if you're tapping into city water, I imagine Rootstown is, and sewer, they don't have any of those expenses. I mean, we probably have $40,000 to $50,000 just in, that we have to put toward drinking water in our wastewater treatment plant, you know, out back. That, you know, probably the majority of schools don't even have to worry about it.
That's the question. I heard somebody said that you had a guy here coming in here so many days a week to test for water, state mandated procedure.
Yes.
What's he get paid to do that?
Right, we pay roughly about anywhere between $1,300 and $1,500 a month to have that done.
Okay, is
And that's
anybody
for
else?
both the drinking water and for wastewater.
This one person tests this water and gets paid for that. He's the one who does, of course.
Yes.
Any other person, janitor, or somebody that can do it or.
Now, you know what, we looked into that. We actually, that was one of the things that I took a look at when we first started to look hard at things in November. And there's a very extensive process that a person has to go through to be able to get that type of
Yeah, get a
certification or license. And then once somebody gets that, we're getting a very good cost from this individual. So much to the fact that we may be getting about half of what it would cost us to go with somebody else.
When you're, so you don't have a janitor certified to do this?
No, we do not. No.
The test is quite expensive to get your water license.
Remember, was you here when we had the problem over that water? The kids couldn't, in fact, my kids were overflowing, and we had to bring in bottled water. They couldn't drink it because it didn't pass, so they passed it back on. So I had a problem, that went on for a year or so, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy, and then if, you know, God forbid something ever happened to whoever you train, and they go find another job, or just, you know, whatever, then you're stuck.
Well, that's the other worry, when you get somebody that's trained in that. From what I understand, with what I had looked into back in the fall, it's a pretty high demand thing, and they can make a lot more money out doing that. So, but yeah, that's what we do right now.
It sounds like a lot of money, but you're right, it's probably about half of what you probably should be paying, so.
Well, we did have another company that was doing that for us, and it was considerably even more expensive than that.
So we do get a good deal on that. I know that that's something that other people have brought up, and we have looked into that, and we do not feel we
Is
can
there
do better.
additives that you put in the water?
That, I don't know the details of
There's,
it. Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't even want to speak to that, to be honest, because I don't know enough about it to speak knowledgeably. I'd be guessing. Can have him contact you if you're interested. You want me to have him call you?
Who's that?
So do you want me to have him call you?
Did you guys test the water?
Yeah. I'll tell you what he does.
No, that was brought up from somebody. And I didn't see him on the list when you had, what, the list of everybody working.
That works here. It's a purchase service is what it is. It's not an employee of the district.
Okay, here's my final question. On a snow day, you have 140 some, how many people work in the school district?
Roughly 140.
40?
140 roughly.
And that- You call that school day off, inclement weather, the number one thing is the safety of the kids. What does it cost this school system for one day not having 140 some people show up? I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands. If you take the average pay that person, somebody did a figure. You take 147, you take the average pay of the janitors, cafeteria people, all the people you pay, and average that out, divide it, even out.
Yeah, I don't have that number. You ever done anything like that?
We calculated at one point in time, but I don't recall the number.
That's another thing, is that why should I as a taxpayer pay for the 5 days that I'm getting my money? I mean, that's what some of the.
I understand. I mean, that's what's out there, and that's,
Thousands of $1,000 you're paying for those people to stay home. And that's why I brought up the thing about bring those people in. It's the safety of the kids, not on my butt.
Well, some of our people do come in. Administrators or central office staff come in, custodians come in. So, don't give everybody the impression, Rick, that everybody stays home, because that's not the
Well, I
case.
see a lot of them out there.
Okay.
Okay, there's a school system, you talk about sick days for a teacher, but with the incentive at the end of the year, you paid a teacher or a person not to use those sick days, it was a little initial bonus at the end of the year. They didn't use their sick days, and we didn't call a $100 sub in to cover that person.
we don't have any provision like that here, but there are
There are
districts that
school
do.
districts that have it.
Yes.
But can they keep accruing the sick days
Yes.
over the years, so they can accumulate, like, they really need them?
Yes.
So
Sick days
they don't
accrued.
have to take it in the year.
No. Sick days accrued, and they go on.
You see people, I know you do, because it happens everywhere, they're abused.
We have provisions in the contract to be able to watch out for those type of things, and we keep an eye on them. Any other questions?
Teachers aren't the only ones that get those. I work for ODOT.
Oh, yeah, everybody does. I'm just saying, in the real world, that's what they come out in the real world, and pay the health care that we pay, on the outside, compared to what, that was great.
What do you consider the real world? You might want to turn that off.
No, I'm just talking about, that was one of the discussions.
Well, I tell you, maybe,
They need to shut that restaurant down for breakfast.
maybe what we can do is wrap up here. If there's individual questions, I'm happy to stay around and talk. But we can, unless there's anything else we want to discuss here. Okay, well, thanks for your time. Like I said, I'll be around here if there's questions.